Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to this much anticipated video. It is the end of the year. 2024 is coming to a close, and it's time as an eyeshadow enthusiast to look at my entire eyeshadow palette collection, see where things stand, and what I might be ready to get rid of. So this is a palette collection tour and declutter, and I'm not going to be ranking in this video, but I do plan on ranking all the palettes that I got in 2024 in a later video that's coming. It hasn't happened yet, but I just want to show you everything that I've got and decide what I'm going to be getting rid of. And I don't have much time to do this because my kids are napping, but they're kind of being stinkers today. So let's get going. There's no real organization to this. Day to day, my palettes are lined up on a bookshelf. When I put them all next to me right now, I just grabbed stacks. So they're kind of organized by general size and brand within that size if I'm able to. There's a little bit smattered about here and there, but that's on the whole how it is. How it's going. If you were wondering about today's eyeshadow look, I will talk about it when I get to that palette. So I'm just gonna grab a stack and show you what I've got and talk about what I'm getting rid of. Let's start off with the Sashimi City palette from Kaleidos. It looks like this. It's a very boring neutral palette, but I actually really like it because the formula is nice. Kaleidos does a good job with neutrals, especially. I think the shadows, they blend so easily and they build pretty nicely too, and the shimmers are really sparkly. So I'm going to keep this palette because even though it's not super exciting, it's not exciting at all actually. It does what it does nicely and I like it. I'm gonna have to reorganize everything when I get back. This is the Sea Talk palette from Uden's Eye. Oh, by the way, before I forget, my microphone is being weird. It's currently charging. Hopefully it's not dead on me, but if my audio is not as good, that's why, because I don't have a microphone. Anyway, here's the Sea Talk palette from Uden's Eye in collaboration with Lauren from Lauren May Beauty. I love this palette. I used it just yesterday. It's so beautiful. It's so interesting. It's got some cool, some warm, some neutrals, some color, and then a couple really, really unique shades. This shade, quite surprisingly, reminds me of one from the Revolution Beauty, the Enchanted Icon palette, which is coming up later. This one reminded me a little of that, which I really wasn't expecting, but it's beautiful and I love it. Anyway, this palette is quite safe. Here now we have the Anastasia Beverly Hills Nouveau palette. Ooh. This peachy shimmer up here decided to crack a little bit and fall into my lap. It is a little bit dry. The shimmer formula in this is a little dry. I very much like the color story, and each time I use this palette, I'm pleasantly surprised by the look that I get because the shimmers are actually, even though they're on the drier side, they're still kind of shiny and sparkly and rather impactful. It's a nice palette. I do like it. It's quite muted. You're not going to get something super bold or vibrant from this, but it's still going to give you a pretty look. Here's a palette from Jaclyn Cosmetics. I don't believe they're open anymore. This is Strawberry Feels. I've held on to this one for quite some time because the undertones of these shades are very flattering on my skin tone. They just seem to work for me, and when I wear these colors I feel really pretty. I'm finally ready to pass it on because the formula is not super good. It doesn't last. I mean, it might look good for a couple hours and then it just fades so much throughout the day. I'll probably just throw it in as a freebie if I sell something on POSHMARK or MERCARI. It's just, I really do love the undertones, but what's the point of wearing something if it doesn't last long enough, you know, to enjoy that look the whole day? So that's the first declutter of the video. Next, we're going to talk about the Tiny Marvels palette from Sydney Grace in collaboration with Mel Thompson. Sydney Grace has an impeccable matte formula, and their shimmers are super creamy and buttery. They're very, very pretty. They're not the sparkle that I like, which I keep saying, but they are very good. I like this palette. Don't love it. I'm going to keep this palette. The formula is beautiful. The packaging is very nice. It's very sleek. It's quality. It feels sturdy. It's just good eyeshadow, and I want to have good eyeshadow in my life. Even if it's not super stimulating, it's good quality. So this one's staying. And that brings us to the Blessed palette, also from Sydney Grace, and also in collaboration, this time with Glitzy Fritzy. I think that this one's pretty. Again, I'm mainly keeping it for the quality because I know the quality is excellent. This is just a beautiful color story, beautiful formula. I only recently noticed that this is pretty much all shimmers except for this one right here, and then this is all mattes. And now that I see it, I can't unsee it, but I think it's a good arrangement, lovely color story. I do like it. I like it, so this is safe as well. From What's Up Beauty, I've got the Dragon Eye palette with their amazing packaging. They do such a good job with packaging. I'm absolutely keeping this palette. This is one of my top favorites in my entire collection. I love the What's Up Beauty formula. I love in their mattes and shimmers. Just beautiful, beautiful. The mattes are so smooth and buttery. They're very easy to work with. I remember once I did a video where I challenged myself not to use any brushes, and I used the What's Up Beauty Geodes palette to do my eyeshadow with only my fingers, and it still looked great. Like, I didn't even need brushes to make their formula work. And then the shimmers are perfect. The shimmers are lightweight and sparkly. They're so good. They're so impactful and dynamic. love. I also love this color story that they branched away from their typical neutral mattes and did some more purpley tones. Super pretty. It's staying. Speaking of the What's Up Beauty Geodes palette, also quite safe in my collection. A beautiful, more neutral leaning color story. The mattes are more earthy and grounded. A little pop of green, a little pop of yellow. It's lovely. It's just a beautiful, beautiful formulation. I highly recommend this brand. And now I do have from Revolution Beauty the Enchanted Icon palette. This is part of a set. They've released, I think, 5 or 6 color stories. And honestly, they're all really pretty. It's like a $12 palette, I think. I got it at Target. And this is the brand that bought out BH Cosmetics. So I did notice some really high quality formula in this palette that it seems like they might be using the BH formula and recipes. Really lovely. These two here are creams, and I think that this color story is just soft and feminine, very floral, very easy. It's very easy to wear, and it's easy to apply as well. So this one's also staying. You may remember that I've been using the Festival palette from Juvia's Place as a face palette. I haven't used this for eyeshadow in quite some time, but I kept it for blushes mainly. I can use this, and this for blushes, and then these two for highlighters. So I've been using that for a while, but I've decided that I'm going to pass it along, mainly because, twofold. Because they're eyeshadows, they're hyper pigmented, which is great for an eyeshadow, but I have to go in so lightly with a blush, and I tend to, even with a light hand, overdo it. And I'm not a heavy blush wearer, so I just want a whisper of color on the cheek. This gives me more of a shout. So, but also I have 2 different palettes of highlighters and then 1 single highlighter. And then I just on Poshmark for $8 bought the Unearthly Spring Magic blush palette, which is 6 pans, and they have the red and the orange, also some pink and also a purple. So I think that these colors are basically covered in an actual subtle blush formula, which is buildable if I want, but doesn't come off too strong. So I'm going to declutter this. That doesn't technically count as an eyeshadow palette from my eyeshadow collection because I never use it as eyeshadows, but it's still a declutter. Here's the Wildwood palette from Alter Ego. I like this palette. This is a dupe for the Natasha Denona Yucca palette, which is a color story that I think is pretty. It's not super varied, and I've heard that this is a great dupe for that one as far as formula, and even some people whose videos I watched when they were directly comparing them, they said that sometimes they preferred this one. I like it. I'm going to keep it. It doesn't give me a lot, and I really need to be in the mood for these colors because these colors are not amazing on me, but if I use them correctly, I can bring out some yellowy green gold tones from my eyes. I just have to be careful which ones I use. But yeah, this is going to stay. Next, I have my only 2 palettes from Colourpop. Let's talk about At First Sight when they collaborated with Raw Beauty Kristi. I'm so torn on this palette. I wanted it for so long. I've gotten a lot of use out of it. I've loved it. I mean, I haven't hit pan or anything because I have a lot of other palettes, but it's pretty. However, Colourpop is not my favorite formula anymore. I did list this for sale and nobody wanted it. Like, the rage for this palette is gone. So then I figured, well, shoot, why don't I just bring it back into my collection and use it? Because of that, I'm really not sure. I don't really want it, but I can't get rid of it, like, to somebody else who really does want it. So I'm not sure. I do have another project on my mind. I might put this one to the side and see if it could be included in the other project. We'll see. I'm gonna keep it for now, but I think it's kind of on the chopping block. Maybe it will be repurposed. Maybe I don't want to throw it away. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just not really sure. And then I also have the Limoncello palette from Colourpop. This is just such a winner, as both of them actually, as far as packaging and presentation. Like, you can just put this on display as a little piece of artwork in your home. I know that this palette is very good for what it is. I just don't tend to do this with my eyeshadow looks. But when I do want to do that, it's a good choice. I like the shimmers in this one more than the ones in At First Sight. This palette also doesn't really excite me anymore, but I do think that I would reach for it more than I would reach for At First Sight. So I'm gonna keep this one as well with less reservations. So here is a brand from Amazon. This is Lamora, and this is their nude palette where they are duping out the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude. I like this palette a lot. I mean, it's not very exciting, obviously. This is a very neutral, kind of boring, plain palette, but it does a good job being that. And so if I'm going for just something that's really quick or really light or has a lot of room for error if I'm in a hurry, I like the palette. What can I say? I like it. So this one's staying. It's good quality. The shimmers, especially this shimmer right here, these two actually, but particularly this one, that's the one that has the deeper dip as well. Really sparkly. More sparkly than I would have expected from a $10 purchase off Amazon, but I like it. They also have, like, this brand Lamora, I believe they might have duped a Pat McGrath. They have other Natasha dupes and also Viseart, I think. Okay, so this is now the second of 4 stacks of palettes. Here we have the Subculture palette from Anastasia Beverly Hills, my second from the brand. And I think I'm going to get rid of this palette. I like it. I really like the color story. I'm very impressed with the pigmentation of the shadows. They're extremely pigmented. I'm going to pass it on for a couple of reasons. It doesn't have enough lightness in it, and the light colors that you do get they don't perform terribly well. Now, that may not be a reflection on the palette. To be fair, this is quite old. It's probably long expired. And so I can't say that the formulation's bad because it's old, right? It's just as far as what I have to work with within my collection, and I'm trying to curate my collection a bit better this year, or at the end of this year and heading into 2025. I just want to own things that truly delight and inspire me, and this doesn't do that. I'm just not excited by it, so I'm gonna pass this one along. Cosmic Beauty is a brand that has a truly beautiful formula. My first palette from them was the Serenity palette. This is the palette that broke the internet. This is the one that really put them on the map, and they've done a great job ever since. I think this palette is beautiful. It's just so interesting. It's kind of like the blue-purple thing, but then you've got really interesting tones of green and some unique pops of color, some multi-chromes. It's lovely. It's really lovely. This shade's gorgeous. This shade's gorgeous. Really dynamic, interesting undertones, absolutely safe and gonna stay in my collection. I have the Winter Wonderland palette, also from Cosmic Beauty. This one was given to me by a friend here and subscriber. This one's beautiful. If you like blue and purple, this is a great option. It also has some pinky tones, some teal tones. I will admit that I don't use it a ton because I have blue undertones, and so when I use very blue shadows, especially the darker that I go within the blue colors family, it just doesn't contrast on my skin. It tends to blend in a little bit too much and starts to make me look tired if I'm not careful. So I have to be selective about what blues and purples I use. I generally tend towards the brighter tones that will contrast a little bit more because of my undertones, but this is beautiful and it's excellent quality. I really like their formulation. This shade right here is so stinking pretty, and this one, when you put it over pretty much anything else in the palette, you're just gonna get a transformed look. Super pretty, staying. Now, the third palette I've got from Cosmic Beauty is the Muse palette. I consider this grungy garden, as Betty Jean says. This is sort of floral, sort of soft. It's like, it reminds me of floral paintings from the Romantic period of the arts, or classical artists and their paintings. Like, even just look at the cover. It's so floral and romantic, and the inside is a beautiful representation of those colors with, again, some really interesting tones with these greens and these like purple iridescence. We've got a couple more murky or dirty feeling sorts of tones, like a dirty mustard and a dirty swampy green, and then some more neutrals. It's a beautiful palette. It's a beautiful array of colors. I love the organization and the way that they put it all together. If I had an eyeshadow brand as my spirit animal, it would be Cosmic Beauty. Okay, now we're on to Nomad, a couple Nomad palettes. This here is the America's Parks palette. It's one of their older ones. I'm ready to pass this along. I think it's a really fun color story. It's a great balance of neutral and colorful, but it's also quite an old formula, also expired, and it doesn't perform as well as what I have now. The shimmers are all kind of hard panning. They don't pick up very well. They're a little dusty, and the mattes are fine. The mattes are fine, but I have lots of great mattes elsewhere as well, so I really need the shimmers to stand out, and for that reason, I'm ready to pass along America's Parks. Similarly is the Nomad Whistler Snow Lodge palette, a gift from one of my subscribers. I think this color story is really lovely. Again, you've got some more quiet tones, a few poppy colors, a few neutrals. It's got a beautiful range of depth and lightness, and the formula is fine. It's not their newest formulation. You're gonna get a good look out of this, but I don't feel excited to play with it anymore, so I think I'm ready to pass this one along as well. This palette is from Ace Beaute, and it's one of my longtime favorites, like from the very beginning. I liked it so much when I bought it in their older formulation that I replaced it in the newer. This is the Flare palette. I think that this is such a beautiful harvest dream. I love the tones in here. Again, we have a decent assortment of like lots of mid-tone to deeper colors, but you do have a few lighter tones. I think it could use a true pastel. Maybe a pastel yellow would really benefit the palette. This doesn't count as pastel. This is an acid green, and it's so much fun, and it's so striking, and it's a great and really interesting color to work with anything else in here, but a lighter matte would have been good. But I do like this palette, and this is Ace Beaute's newer formulation. Does anybody know what they're doing? They've been saying for like a year that they're rebranding. All they're doing is selling stuff at a discount. Are they actually rebranding? Are they just selling off stock and gonna disappear? Are they coming back and changing? Like they just released like a brush cleaning machine. I don't know what they're doing, but I like the palette, so. Okay, so Blend Bunny. Blend Bunny has such a fantastic formula, especially their mattes. They are such a good formulation. I have two Blend Bunny palettes and they're both coming up. This is the Lure palette. It's lovely. It really is. This is a truly special shade. This is called Pearl, and this shade just makes the palette. Like I said, their matte formula is amazing. I love their matte formula, and I really do like their newer shimmer formula. It reminds me of Beauty Bay, reminds me of Glamlight. It's a nice shimmer formula. I recently used this as my palette pull-in, which is a little project I have where I use every shade in the palette in consecutive order, incorporate it into whatever eye look I'm doing that day. So I just finished this palette pull-in, and I'm actually going to pass this one along, which does surprise me, but part of my struggle with Blend Bunny is that I personally, and I know that I'm the odd one out here, I don't care for a gradient. I like my colors to be all mixed up, because when there's a gradient, that's all I can see, and I feel creatively stifled. Also, I wish that this palette had a bit more variety. Like, this is obviously green, obviously aqua, obviously blue, but these two shades right here are very close, and these two, very close. There's just not enough variety. So I'm gonna pass along the Lure palette. The other palette I have from Blend Bunny is Sickly Sweet. This was a Halloween release last year, and this one I really like. Again, I get the incredible matte formula and I get the really pretty shimmer formula. I especially like that these shimmers are more interesting tones than in the Lure palette, but they're also a little bit more sparkly and more light, which I prefer. I like a lightweight, sparkly shimmer in generally lighter colors. So these shimmers are better for me. I love that this palette gives us deepening shades, but they didn't just go right to black. They gave us a deeper purple, a deeper brown, a deeper teal. They gave us depths that make sense with the colors in the palette. There's a little bit of redundancy. A couple of the shades are kind of close, like a little bit close, but I think it's a great palette and I'm happy to keep this one. And if ever I have a palette like the Flare palette where I just need a pastel to finish it out, I've got options. BH Cosmetics had such a great formula before they went chapter 11, and I have their Naughty palette from a couple of years ago, a couple Christmases ago. This palette's kind of giant, but it's such a good formulation. I haven't yet been able to pass it along because every time I use it, I'm just surprised again and impressed again. And now that I think about it, I feel like the BH shimmer formula is kind of like Sydney Grace. Just really, really smooth and creamy. Not very glittery, not very thick, not textured, not sparkly, but a beautiful, slightly metallic leaning creamy formula. It's very nice. So I'm gonna keep this. It's got so many different options, and I did an entire week of videos dedicated to this palette. I have a week of series on my channel where I do a whole week of uploads using just the one eyeshadow palette. So check that out if you want. I'll try to remember to card it either above or put it in the description box or something. But I have a week dedicated to probably 8 to 10 different palettes from my collection, and this was one of them. The next palette we're going to talk about is the Colored Rain Queen Bee palette. Colored Rain is going out of business. They have a big sale on their website. Everything's like $2.50. But buyer beware, because a lot of people have been saying that when they received their order, something was wrong. Either they didn't get what they ordered or they got the wrong shade or something. You know, they ordered a blush and they didn't have the blush color, so they just chucked in a different blush color. I personally made a small order and I got one of the 3 items that I ordered, and like no explanation. And of course, you can email customer service, which I did, but nobody's hearing back because they're going out of business. They have no incentive outside of just having integrity to respond to you when they can't give you a refund or won't, and they have no customer service. It's not ideal. I understand. I'm not condoning bad business practices though. And I would just say buyer beware. And I didn't know about this when I recommended on my community tab that you get the Queen Bee palette. I didn't know that there were issues with the process, but anyway, this is the Queen Bee palette and it is beautiful. And I really like this. I recently used this last week, I think, on my channel. It's great. It's a beautiful little 6-pan, excellent quality. The mattes are super pigmented and rich and full. It's very, very autumnal harvest. It's beautiful. And the 2 shimmers are super pretty. This shimmer is multi-chromatic and then this one is duochromatic at least. It's a really good palette. I do like it. I do recommend it. I just don't know that I can say go to the brand's website and order stuff because you might not get it. And then there's no recourse if you don't. All right, we have landed upon what is now my favorite formula. The mattes and the shimmers, top notch, my new favorite. And I'm talking about Unearthly Cosmetics. I have 2 palettes from them. This is the Lure palette and it's like folklore. Honestly, a lot of Unearthly's themes are not something I'm willing to get, but the ones that I have are okay. So this is Medusa, obviously on the cover. And this color story is just dreamy. It's so So beautiful. It's so interesting. I mean, what is this? We've got orange, okay, and black. Yeah, that's easy. I just showed you that in the Queen Bee. But then we've got this green brown shade, and now we've got a pop of blue, and then we've got purpley pink tones. It's just so different. The formula is absolutely incredible. I love it so much. So much. It's gorgeous. Absolutely keeping the Lure palette. And this palette is, because the shades are kind of shifting, you get different, you know, different flips in the shimmers. It's actually more versatile than just the 9 pans, because you can put this shimmer with these mattes and it's going to look one way, but if you put this shimmer with other mattes, it's going to look a different way. And if you pair the shimmer with another shimmer, you're going to get a third look that's totally different. Super dynamic and impactful. And such good formula. Uden's Eye has been a long time favorite. I'm not sure what they're doing these days. It seems that a lot of people are saying their formula is slipping. I personally have experienced that as well. I hope that they figure it out, because they're starting to lose long-time faithful customers. And that's like, I'm not planning on ordering anything from Uden's Eye. I didn't order anything from their Black Friday sale because I don't know if I can trust what I get. So just putting it out there, but I do have a lot of great palettes from Uden's Eye. So let's talk about that, because I think all of my Uden's Eye is coming up. Here is Saga of Freya. This was a 2-part series, so chapter 1, chapter 2. This is the Amber Tears palette. I recently got this one from a friend, and I like it. It's not amazing, it's not very exciting, but kind of like the Sashimi City. It's pretty, it's not super exciting or dynamic, but I like it, so I'm gonna keep this palette. It's not a love, but I do like it. The counterpart is palette number 2, Cat's Breath palette, and I really like this one. I like this one a lot more. It's much brighter, it's more interesting and bold. It does have a beautiful variety of colors and also different shimmers in texture, but also color. It's got some depth and it's got some lightness. It's well balanced. I do like this palette, so this one's gonna stay. Now let's talk about the palette that I used for my eyeshadow look today. This is the Hey Reindeer palette. I received this in a trade with a subscriber. So let me tell you what I did for today's look. Wait, let me remind myself what I did for today's look. Okay, so what I did, I started off with this shade right here in my outer crease. I blended it softly with this orange. I really just kept that in the outer half or so of the eye. Then I put this all over my inner corner and the inner crease area. For shimmers, I used this on most of the lid space, and then in the inner area, I used this one. And then I tapped just a tiny bit of candy cane right on top in the center. This is a really pretty shimmer. I think that's all I did. Oh no, on my lower lash line, I carried this blue down and through about a third of the way, and then the rest of the lower lash line is this shade right here. So I have been enjoying the colors of this palette, but not the layout. There's something about it which confuses me, and I really like the shades themselves, and I haven't had a problem with the formula, although I will say that this blue pastel is barely blue. It really looks a little bit more white. The way it's all organized doesn't seem to make sense to me. I struggle in my head to make it make sense, to make it work. So I'm gonna keep this one. I'm gonna put it to the side and see if it might work in a future project. But I like a lot about it. It's just, as a whole, is something I'm struggling with. So I'm gonna keep it and see how I can use it in a different way. On to one of Uden's Eye's very best creations, the Merry Christmas palette from Christmas 2022. This palette's not going anywhere. It's so stinking beautiful. It's so good. The formula is amazing. Now, in talking with people about Uden's Eye and whether or not their formula is slipping, some people have said that when they got the 2022 Christmas palettes at the re-release in 2023, they're having trouble with them. And so I do wonder if Uden's Eye used like a newer formulation for the relaunch of these a year later, which kind of feels like a bait and switch, because these originals are awesome. So if your palette's not awesome and you like Uden's Eye and you know what their formula should be, maybe they switched up the formula when these came back with the Snow Dream and Hey Reindeer. I don't know for sure. I'm speculating, but that's a possibility, I guess. This is amazing. I love this palette. It's safe. It's not going anywhere. Similarly is its little counterpart, the Christmas Eve palette. Also fantastic, beautiful. Everything's right, except I do wish it had a deeper purple tone, like purple matte. That's the only thing I would change, I think, but it's so beautiful. It's so interesting. You've got blue and purple, that's kind of expected, but they brought in mustardy tones. They brought in like a blacky blue. They brought in green and silver. It's lovely. Okay, this is, I think, the very first palette that I ordered from Uden's Eye, along with Cat's Breath. I got the Norns, and you can see that this is in their earlier formulation with the circular pans. I thought that I didn't like this palette and was going to pass it on, and then because nobody was buying it, just like at first sight, I brought it back into my collection and played with it some more. And when I did, I kind of fell in love with it because it's actually got super interesting colors. All of these are multi-chromatic. This is the most, like, one of the most interesting shades in my entire collection. It's a really versatile shimmer. It's sort of like a browny silver shimmer, but it's gonna move around and go with whatever you pair it with. So if you pair it with oranges, it pulls more warm. If you pair it with pink, for example, it's gonna start to look more purpley, pinky, silvery. If you pair it with blues, it's gonna cool things down. It's just a really, really interesting shade. Probably my favorite shade in the whole palette. Again, this is the older formulation. They did bring Norns back in their newer and presumably good formulation before they formulated again with the new pan sizes and shapes as well. So I recommend this palette. I love it. Here we have Hella, the first time that Anjelka Nyqvist collaborated with the brand. This is a great palette as well. Think about the Wildwood palette from Alter Ego, duping out Natasha Denona Yucca. That's what I get from these tones right here, and they're the ones I tend to stay away from on the whole, or I use them as a transition color. But this is beautiful, and it's such a versatile palette. It has lightness, it has depth, it has neutrals, it has colors, it's got some interesting tones, it's got face highlight. Beautiful palette, very, very nice, very good balance of formula and color and texture and depth. It's great. Continuing with Uden's Eye, I've got the Mighty Monster palette, which is a recent collaboration this year, I think, with Annette from Annette's Makeup Corner. I thought the packaging for this trio, the second iteration of Legendary Diversa, was so gorgeous. Like, this is so, so pretty. I like the color story a lot, and I really liked the looks that Annette created with her palette, so I thought I was going to enjoy it. I bought this for my birthday. I'm super disappointed. I'm actually getting rid of this one because it's not the formula that I know from the brand. The shimmers are all, like, basically hard pan already, or they don't feel hard but you still can't get them. The mattes are patchy. I'm very dissatisfied with this and frustrated and quite frankly annoyed. I've used this like 4 to 6 times since my birthday, which was just about 3 or 4 weeks ago, trying to get myself to love it, and it's not working. So this is gone. Back in the summertime, I think, Uden's Eye released a very neutral collection for their brand. They tend to do pretty colorful stuff, but they released the Yord's Divine collection, and I bought both palettes. Here is the Stone and Rock. Now, some people have said that they see the decline in formula in this collection as well. I haven't noticed it too much, not like Mighty Monster. I've been so disappointed with Mighty Monster every time I use it. I have not had that experience with the 2 palettes in this collection. I have noticed a little bit of dryness in 1 or 2 of the shimmers, but that's it. I think these palettes are beautiful. I love the color story. This palette is the reason that I haven't bought the Undergrowth palette from Cosmic Beauty, which is gorgeous, but I feel like Undergrowth is just this color story built out a tiny bit more, because that's a 20 pan palette and this is 15. I think that this is the Undergrowth palette. You've got the greens, you've got the browns, you've got the neutrals. I actually think that it's a little bit more dynamic maybe, or versatile with these lighter shades right here and this bluey tone. It's gorgeous, and I really, really like it. And I love the sparkle I get from this, and I don't really have complaints about this, so I can't justify buying Undergrowth, even though it's so pretty, but this is good too. I used this like 3 days ago and I got a gorgeous look. Its sister is the Jewels and Gem palette, which is, I call this an evening garden color story. It's soft, it's floral, it's romantic, it's gentle, it's breeze in a willow tree kind of vibes. It's desaturated, it's super pretty. Super, super pretty. Again, as far as formulation, maybe this shimmer is a tiny bit dry, and perhaps this one as well. Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, but that's the color itself, so it's not like it's just not a dynamic shimmer. That's the color. Like I said, the whole palette is more desaturated and subtle. I like it. And actually, this shade right here is just the most beautiful rosy lilac sort of transition shade. It's gorgeous. I like this palette. Okay, we're back to Ace Beaute for a minute here. This is the Aura palette, and I really, really like this palette. This one actually is the one that I thought that I would like less of the 2, but I like this one more. It's really versatile because it's got the purples, but it also has berry, it has gold, it has more neutrals like browns and yellow. You can get really interesting looks out of this palette, and the formula is pretty. And then this shade up here, is actually like a silvery purple shifting shade. It's pretty. I like this one. The other palette in that collection is the Envy, which I thought I would like more because just look at this color story. It's such a dream. It's so pretty. I'm tempted to pass this one along because it leans very, very dark. And I feel that with the purples, I can get away with leaning dark, but with the blue colors, like I said, because of my undertones, I don't usually use the really dark blues. And this palette has like four super dark blues. This one I love, but this is lighter. And these are so beautiful. So this palette's like 50-50 for me. What I might do is try to sell it, and if I can't pass it along, then I'll probably just bring it back in and use it with other things. But I don't see a reason to keep it if I only use half of it and the other half I ignore, when maybe somebody out there would use all of it. I mean, it's not like I don't have options. Juvia's Place really surprised me. I had tried several palettes from them, which was like, they were older releases, and I was unimpressed. But then somebody gave me the Garden of Juvia's, and I really, really like this palette. This really took me by surprise. The formula, but particularly the shimmers. I really love this. They're just lightweight and sparkly. They are gonna give you some color, but it's not taking over the whole look. It's just this light wash of glimmer. They're so, so pretty. My only qualm with this palette is a little bit more contrast would have been nice. And then maybe take one of these purple shimmers and turn it into more of a brown shimmer that would work with these shades here. Very pretty. Really like it. This seems to be a newer formulation for Juvia's Place. The Candy Shop palette looks just like this one. Visually, it looks like the same formula. And then they released the Culture palettes. I don't know what they're doing, but this is working. Okay, Lethal Cosmetics. I have just one palette from them, and I think that they have recently reformulated as well. Their Avatar collection seems to be a different formula from everything else I've seen from them, actually. I have the Wildflower palette. It looks like this. It's very, very pretty, and this palette gives me super striking looks because just the right tones to pop. They're very, very pretty. This is kind of like unicorn vibes. You know, we've got these candy purples and pinks and minty greens. Super pretty. This shade is the most deceptive shade in my entire collection because never can I get it to look like that. It always looks blue. Doesn't matter what I pair it with. It's a very pretty palette. I will only say about the Lethal shimmers is they're pretty fragile and they're more on the dry side. So it's likely, and that's why I have the little slip in there, it's likely to break a lot more easily. These shimmers kind of remind me of the ones from the ABH Nouveau palette. Still pretty, still striking, but a little bit drier, and you can kind of see a casualty before it happens. This year is the first year that I received PR, and this is one of the palettes. This is from It's Belle Cosmetics. They're officially closed now, but they had done, right before they closed down, they'd done a collaboration with Brie from Brie C Beauty, and this is her Tropical Nights palette. It's super striking. It's very, very bright, very pretty. Now, I haven't had any problems with the It's Belle formula. Actually, I expected that these shimmers, because they have slightly oily lids, I thought that they might crease, but I haven't even had creasing. So it's been a fine formula. I think the palette's really pretty. I think Brie did a great job creating something that had a lot of versatility, and like you can work a lot of different angles with these colors. It's really pretty. I'm glad to have it. I'm grateful to have received it in PR, and I'm going to keep it. My very favorite green palette of all time is the Dirty Martini from Glamlight. This is now the only Glamlight palette I have left, and I like this one. I just like it. This is a great green palette. Obviously, there are a couple of shades that are not green. We have some blues, we have some browns, but on the whole, it's a beautiful, beautiful color story. It's super well curated. Everything just works together perfectly. You're not going to be able to get a bad color combination from this palette. There's no guesswork. You can do anything and it will look pretty. I think this is great. The formula is lovely and it's a winner. It's just a winner, and it's been a winner from the beginning. I really wish Glamlight would stop with all these crazy collabs and go back to some original ideas. Like that was from their Happy Hour collection. That was such a unique idea. And the way that they presented the whole collection was really good. The formula was amazing. They were just great palettes. A lot of people say that Chocolate Martini is one of their best neutral palettes. I really wish Glamlight would stop and just go back to some truly original ideas. Now we're on to one of the most expensive brands in my collection. I didn't pay full price, I rarely do, but this is Natasha Denona and her Retro palette, and it looks like this. This palette is very good quality. It's really pretty and it's nice colors. I find that I don't use it that often because I'm just not drawn to these colors right now in this season of life. I'm still really interested in more colorful looks on the whole, although I do enjoy neutrals more than I used to. And specifically, sparkly shimmers. I just want sparkle. And this palette, this one's sparkly, but that's the only one. The rest are a little bit more muted. They're kind of a step up from satin, but still not really glimmery or glittery. I like it. It's not exciting me. So I think I'm ready to pass this one along, see if somebody else will, honestly, if just somebody else will use it and enjoy it more than I am, because it's nice. But I think that Natasha Denona is not the brand for me. Here is the only palette that I still have from Beauty Bay. This is the Wilderness palette. This one's just an old favorite. It's been so great. It's been through a lot. I've used it so much. I really like this palette. I don't think I'm ready to pass it on yet, but I haven't used it in a while. I'm not sure. I think I'm going to keep it for now. Perhaps consider it for my other project. We'll see, but I think I'm going to hold on to it. So we're on the final of the 4 stacks, and I think that most of these are safe, but there are a couple I'm planning on passing along. So I'm doing pretty good though. I'll give you a count at the end. We'll start off with the Sorceress Smoke palette, which is the other one from Unearthly. I love this palette. Again, I'm just starting to appreciate neutrals more than before. This palette is a neutral dream. You've got cool tones, warm tones, neutrals, a couple pops of color, but they're not too colorful. They still probably count as neutral like this over here, but they're so beautiful. The colors, the formulation, the assortment, the variety, the arrangement, it's just great. So pretty. I love this palette. It's not going anywhere. Okay, so here's a brand that I said I wasn't going to feature on my channel when was that? Oh, I was ranking last 6 palettes that I got, and I said I wasn't going to feature this palette, but I liked using it, so it was just going to be something I used on the sidelines. I'm not going to keep this palette. This is from Lunar Beauty. It's the 12 Days of Lunar. I mentioned in the video that I wasn't going to support them, and a few subscribers asked why, so I'll pop up in the screen my reasoning for why. I don't really want to say things that might be slanderous. It's all alleged, but it's just drama, and I'm not interested in the drama, and I'm especially not interested in supporting people who might be doing terrible things. So all of that to say, I was gonna keep this palette because the first 1 or 2 times I used it, I really liked my looks. But then the second 1 or 2 times I used it, I was pretty unhappy, and I think it was creasing a lot, and the shimmers that I used those times weren't as dynamic. So I'm gonna get rid of this. I think the black is terrible. It's really weak, barely opaque. It's just not good. I think the color story is pretty. This looks very, very pretty. I just bought a coat that's basically this color. It's a pea coat, and when I was walking through Walmart, I passed a Grinch display, and I was like, I am the same color as the Grinch. And I kind of love it. Anyway, I think that some of these are pretty, and some of them are not. So I don't want to keep a palette that's just halvesies and is from a brand that I'm not supporting. Yeah, so that's that. Okay, let's talk about Sigma. I, in the past, had 2 different Sigma palettes, decluttered both of them because I just didn't love using them. Then recently, for my birthday, I bought myself the Little Mermaid palette because I thought the color story was just perfect. They did such a great job. I liked the packaging, and I wanted to give them another try. I had also seen a lot of videos where people were talking about the formulas, and there were some duochromatic shades in here, and I thought, sure, got it on sale, or no, I got it secondhand per usual. Why not, right? I've been really happy with this palette. And this palette, the color story is actually very similar to the Mighty Monster from Uden's Eye. I was expecting to like that one more and have this one be a little disappointing because I had already decluttered other Sigma palettes, but no, this one is very good, and the Uden's Eye is out the door, so I don't know what's happening. I've gotten a lot of really different looks from this palette. It's got neutrals, it's got cool blue and green and purple sorts of tones. It does have some duochromatic shades. It does have some sparkly shades, different formulas, no trouble with the mattes. I have not had any problems with this at all, and every look that I've done has been a delight and a little bit surprising. So I'm quite pleased with the Little Mermaid palette, and it's gonna stay. Go Sigma, right? Back to Ace Beaute. Here's their Classical Paradise. I like this palette a lot. This one's a little bit more neutral leaning harvest kinds of tones, but they just seem to work really well on my eyes. I have hazel eyes, so there's a lot of brown, but my eyes also have some green and little flecks of gold, and this palette seems to pull those colors out and just pop in a different way, you know? I think the formula's nice. I like the arrangement. I like that we have lighter tones and deeper tones. These 3 are a bit too close in my humble opinion. You could go quite neutral if you want, or you could bring in some more color. It just has a lot of variety, and the formula's nice, so I'm gonna keep that one. From Sydney Grace, another collaboration, this time with Tina from the Fancy Face, we have the Tropicolor palette. I really like this palette. This one's very pretty. It's quite bright and bold. There are a couple really unique shimmers over here. Dr. Bird is duochromatic at least. It's like a pink purple brown actually. And again, the Sydney Grace formula is amazing. So I'm happy to keep Tropicolor in my collection. Ooh, this is an original. This is like throwback. Here is the Adept Plain Jane palette. I'm going to open it this direction first. Make sure nothing has broken because it is getting a little old, and I think one or two of these shimmers are considering falling out. Beautiful, lightweight and sparkly. I have no qualms with this. It's super pretty. It's getting a little old, but I mean, look, it's certainly performing. Yeah, I'm gonna keep Plain Jane. I just have to be careful with it because I do think that one or two of the shimmers are gonna shatter. We'll see. It's mainly Sydney Grace and Nomad the rest of the way. Mainly, but not only. Here is the Quintessence palette from Sydney Grace, one of their collaboration palettes with Temptalia. And I think this one's pretty. I'm gonna hold on to this one. I like the coolness of it. I like that we've got some really easy transition tones that are a little bit more gray leaning, which isn't typical. Most transition tones are not gray, so it gives me something unique. The shimmers are super pretty, and I get pretty looks out of it. I haven't used it a lot. I think it's just because the Sydney Grace shimmers are a bit less sparkly than I prefer. But honestly, I do love the Sydney Grace, both of the Sydney Grace formulas. I just have to be in that kind of mood. My only palette from Gourmand Girls, and the one that demonstrated to me what an incredible formula they have, is the Haunted palette. Got this one on sale. It's one of the few things I've bought new, and it's great. The formula is amazing. The shimmers are super, super impactful, like maybe even a little bit too, a little bit over the top. So if you want to play them back a bit, then use a dry brush, but very, very nice formula. The mattes are incredible. You just like throw them down and they're pretty much blending themselves. Super pigmented and easy to work with. It's pretty intense, maybe not beginner friendly, maybe have a little bit of skill under your belt before you dive into something as bold and hyper pigmented as Gourmand Girls, but it's beautiful. I mean, I really like their formula. I'd like to get some more palettes from them. We'll see. My very favorite palette from Nomad Cosmetics is the Monteverde Cloud Forest. I just think this one is just the most fun. It's so stinking fun. It's bright, it's bold, it's pops of neon mixed with a bunch of green or neutral tones, and it has a few really interesting shades, like Hanging Bridges right here is a pink, green, brown sort of shifting shade. Super pretty. I don't have any problems with the formula. I just think that this palette's excellent. And this one over here, Magical Mist, is again kind of shifty. It's like tealy purple. Here, Cloud Canopy is almost a silvery brownish blue. I don't know. They did something special with this palette, and it's just a lot of fun. Absolutely, this one's safe. Another palette from Nomad is their Verona Love and Death palette, which was what, Thanksgiving this year or last year. I'm gonna declutter this palette. I'm sorry, it's awkward to hold. I like the idea. I understand the format. Like you've got the death sad side, you've got the bright bold love side. This side's way too monochromatic. I really wish that they had added in some other colors, a little bit of orange maybe, still sort of with the Valentine's theme, but more colors, because it's just pink and red usually becomes pink when you work with it on the eye, whereas this side is not just black. It's not just sadness and depth. You have blues, you have purples, you have this odd green gold. This side is way more fun to play with, honestly. As far as the palette itself, like aside from the color story, the shimmers are kind of hard pan. They're a little bit hard to use, and I don't have a problem with the mattes, but I think I'd rather see if I can sell this to somebody who has been wanting it. I believe it's discontinued, so maybe somebody else wants it more than I do and will use it more than I am. I also think I'm ready to pass along my Paradise Islands palette from Nomad. This one's quite a bit older. The formula is a little bit drier, a little bit more dusty. It's not their newest formulation. It is really pretty. Some of these mattes are just great, and a couple of the shimmers, when I used them, I'm like, oh, that's better than I was expecting. But there's something about this palette that doesn't draw me in. I think it's because it has very little depth. There's almost no contrast. These are the two deepest shades, and they're really not that deep. They're not even, as I would say, a deep mid-tone. They're kind of middling mid-tone. And then some pastels. It's pretty. It's a fun color story. I think it's a good color story and cohesive. You can get some really nice looks out of it, but it's not exciting to me. This one up here is sort of hard pan, and this one too. They're not really going to give you what you want I think part of it's just the formula getting older, but I'm not using it, so I think I'll try to pass it on. 2 palettes left. We are almost done. One of them is also from Nomad Cosmetics. This is the Ireland Wild Atlantic Way, which is the other and first PR I've ever received. The brand sent this to me and I was just so excited because I love Ireland, I love green, and I thought that it was a great color story, a great palette in general. Beautiful formula. This is Nomad's newer formulation, so the shimmers are more sparkly and a little bit lighter. I haven't had any problems with any of these pans. Nothing has hard panned on me. It's pretty matte heavy, which I prefer. I just really like this palette. I mean, I love green. You get some really unique undertones because they're different kinds of greens. You know, we've got like a grass green, a murky swampy green, a true forest green, and then here is like a teal, and then this is a Kelly green, I guess. I don't know. It also has some neutrals, it also has some blues, it has a couple clear inner corner highlights. Maybe one of these could have been like a much deeper green matte, but I think it's a really pretty palette and I like it, And finally, the last palette in my eyeshadow palette collection is from Ensley Rain. This is the Cold Moon. I recently won this in a giveaway from Heather Eaglin, Ashes on My Lashes. And it's my first Ensley Rain palette, and it's amazing. It's just, it's absolutely gorgeous. The formula. Now, Ensley Rain is famous for their shimmers, but I have got to give them credit. I think the mattes might even be better than their shimmers. These mattes are impeccable. They are top notch. It's like working with butter, powdered butter. Does that make sense? They're so creamy and smooth. They're so easy to use. They basically blend themselves. They're amazing. But then the shimmers are also amazing. The shimmers are super sparkly. A couple of these are a little bit more flaky, and then a couple of them are a little bit more textured, and the shimmers are shifty, so they go different directions. It might go more pink, more gold, more blue, more green. It's a pretty palette. You don't get the most varied looks out of it because of fundamentally you're working within kind of the same color family, and then you just grab a shimmer that leans one way or the other. These Ensley Rain palettes are expensive. All Ensley Rain palettes are expensive. You have to accept that you're getting quality. I recommend waiting for a sale. They're very expensive. And now my kids are awake and crying, so I need to let you guys go. They're very expensive, but they're excellent quality, so you have to weigh that out. Anyway, guys, that is my entire eyeshadow palette collection. I'm going to pop up in the screen the number of palettes that I've kept versus the number that I have decluttered. I appreciate you so much for being here. Thank you for giving me some of your time. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Any other content that I film in December will be using my now newly curated eyeshadow palette collection. I'm not planning on using things that I've decluttered. I hope that you will consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed this content and you want to see more. Be sure to check my description box for other video suggestions, playlist ideas. There are like 500 or 600 videos on my channel. I really like eyeshadow. So thank you very much for being here again, and I hope to see you guys in my next video. Bye.